Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. In this video, I will show you how to create, update, and delete records in a Blazor Web App using .NET 8 and how to set up the base for a real project. I will demonstrate the CRUD functions, creating a new record by filling in the data and clicking Save, updating a record by changing some information and then saving it, and deleting a record. It's very basic, right? Okay, let's start now. Okay, now I will create a new project. Search Blazor and you can see the option is .NET Aspire Starter Application. It will create a project with frontend is Blazor Web App and Web API Backend Service. I will name it Blazor App and choose the target framework is .NET 8. Here we have 3 projects and 1 library. I will collapse it. The first we have Blazor App.API Service. This is API Backend Service. The front end will call the APIs from here. And this app host project handles running all of the projects. And service defaults is a set of extension methods. And this is front-end Blazor Web App project. Yeah, I will run the project now. And you can see here we have 2 projects running. One is API Service, and another one is Web Frontend. This is API Services. And this is Web Frontend using Blazor Web App. We can test the interactive and loading data from API. Look great. Now let's explore the .NET Aspire dashboard. The Console tab displays the console output from each of the projects in your app. The Structured tab displays structured logs in table format. The Traces tab displays the traces for your application. And the last is Metrics tab displays various instruments and meters that are exposed and their corresponding dimensions for your app. Metrics conditionally expose filters based on their available dimensions. Okay, I will turn it off. Now we start set up the base for the real project. I will use the layered architecture, more specifically a popular model called Service-Oriented Architecture, SOA. This architecture be used in most modern web applications today. In this model, application components are divided into clear layers. Each layer has specific responsibilities and interacts with other layers through clearly defined interfaces. The layer 1 is Presentation Layer, Web API. This layer have controller, and it handles HTTP requests from the user, client, and transfers them to the corresponding services. It is also responsible for returning results to the user. The layer 2 is Business Logic Layer, Service Layer. This layer have service, and it contains the application's business logic. Services will call repositories to retrieve or manipulate data from the database. The layer 3 is Data Access, Repository Layer. This layer have repository and it is responsible for accessing and manipulating data from the database. It provides methods to perform CRUD, create, read, update, delete operations. The layer 4 is Data Layer, Database Layer. This layer have database and it is where the application's data is stored. This API service is Presentation Layer, and now I will create some class library for others layers. Add new project, search library, and choose the class library. I will named it is Blazor App.bl is business logic. Actually, I will put service and repository in this library. So it will have 2-layer business logic layer and data access layer. I will create another library for models. Add new project, choose the class library. Named it as Blazor App.models. And then I will create another library for database layer. Choose the class library. Named it as Blazor App.database. Okay, this the base directory. I will create some folders for it. First, I will create a folder in API service called controllers to store our controllers here. And in business logic library, I don't use this class, so I will remove it and create a new folder called services to store our services, and another folder called repositories to store our repositories. In database library, I will create a new folder called data to store the database context. And in models library, I will create a folder named entities and another folder named models. Now, let's run the API service. I will use view mode. Right-click in the project. Choose View in Browser, or you can press Ctrl-Shift-W. You will see it return the default data of Weather API. I will use Swagger to this project. Let's open the program.cs. I will remove this. And here, map controllers. And services, add controllers. Add Endpoint API Explorer. Then, let's add Swagger Gen. It will need to add a package. You can press Alt-Enter to show the quick actions, allow you to add the reference package directly. Sometime Visual Studio cannot open it. Just close and open it again. Here, if you don't see any option, let's manually install the package. Go to NuGet Package Manager, search Swagger, remember to set package source as all. You should install two package, Swagger Gen and Swagger UI. It should be okay now. And if environment is development, let's add Swagger and Swagger UI. And in launch setting, change the launch URL to Swagger for both HTTP and HTTPS. Let's view the API service. We can see the Swagger UI here, but we don't have any API. Let's add some API, but we need to create an DB context first. I will use Entity Framework Core Code first in this project. Before add a DB context, I will create the entity. In Model Library, in Entity folder, add a class. Have the name is productModel.cs. make it public, and I will create some properties for it. First, integer ID, string product name, integer quantity, double price, string description, and datetime create at with default datetime.now. If you will see the warning here about non-nullable property, let's click to that library and simply change the value of tag nullable from enable to disable. It looked good now. Then, in Database Library, in Data folder, create a class named appdb context.cs. Make is public, and inherit the DB context class from Entity Framework. Show quick actions, and you can see the option is Install Package Entity Framework Core. Just click in to find and install the latest version. Then let's create a constructor method for it. Pass into it the DB context option, and use the base keyword to call the constructor of the base class and pass the option parameter to it. Then call database.ensureCreated to create the database and the schema if it doesn't already exist. Then create dbSet for our product model. I will use quick actions to add project reference to model library for this database library, then we can use product model. I realized that we missed adding the project reference for API service, in dependencies, click Add Project Reference, choose BL and Model Library, in BL Library, choose Model and Database Library, and in Database Library, we already add the Model Library. Then, let's add the config for DB context in program.cs. Add Builder Services, add DB context. Use appdb context and the options. Use SQL Server. If there is no quick option to add the package, let's add manually. Go to NuGet Manager and search Entity Framework Core SQL and install it. Now we can using Entity Framework Core and pass into it the connection string from app setting. I will name it default connection. Then go to app setting to set up it. Create a property is connection string. Have child is default connection, and have the value is your connection string. Here I will use local SQL Express database. Now let's create a controller in API Service Project. Right-click, add an API controller empty, named productcontroller.cs. Now let's create an API to return list of products. Add an HTTP GET method, and I would like to return the same result for all our API, called base response model. I will create it in model library, in models folder, add a class named baseResponseModel.cs. And it will have some property, Boolean success, string error message, and an object named data. Okay, go back to product controller, using model, and the name of function is getProducts. Defined variable products to get the data from the service. We have not created the service yet, but let's assume we have. To use service in the controller, we need to inject it. This is a topic about inject in dependency injection. If you would like to know more about this, let's comment below. I will make a video to explain and how to use dependency injection, and you will very easy to understand. But now, let's use primary constructors. Pass into it the interface iProduct service, and we will create that service very soon. But it should have the function getProducts. And return OK. New base response model. Have success is true, and data is our list product. Now let's create that service. In BL Library, click to Folder Services. Add a class named Product Service. I will also put the interface of Product Service here. In the top, declare an interface iProduct service. And the product service will implement that interface. Now let's create a function for the interface, return task list product model, named getProducts. Show quick actions in implement and choose implement interface. This function will return data from repository. Assume we already have the repository. Let's inject it by primary constructors. Pass into it iProduct repository. And it should have a function getProducts. Now let's create the repository in Repositories folder. Create a class named Product Repository. Declare iProduct repository interface. Implement it. Now we can use the interface. Declaring function like the service. Then choose Implement Interface. Now we need DB context to get the data from database. Use primary constructors gain, pass into it appdb context. And then we can return dbcontext.products.toListAsync. That is the flow we get the data from DB, controller call to service, service call to repository, and repository call to DB. And we can use the service in the controller now. And one thing to remember that we need to declare the dependency. Go to program.cs. Use add scope for iProduct service and product service, and add another scope for iProduct repository and product repository. Now let's run the API service. You can see our API to get list product here. Let's try to execute this. Yeah, It returns status code 200, but there is no data in the DB. Let's manually add some data. I will open SQL Manager, Table Product, choose Edit Top 200 Rows. Then put some data here. And execute it again. Great, we get the data here. So, this is the flow we make the API in the backend. Next, we will create the front end to show that list products. In the Web project and in Pages folder, let's create a new folder named Product. Then create a Razor component named Index Product. I would like to have C# code in separate file, so I will create a partial class for this component called indexproduct.razor.cs and set it partial. Then I will create a property to stored list of product. We missing the reference to model project here, just add it in the project reference. And named it Product Models. Then let's override the onInitialized async method. We use it for get the data to load it. But here I will create a class call API client to easy to make an API call to the backend and it can reusable. I will revise this class, but we're not use this. I will change the name to API client. Remove the redundant code. Then create a generic method to make and API get to the backend. It will return list T called getFromJSON async have parameter path and return HTTP client.getFromJSON async. We missing to pass the type T here. And fix this nullable warning. Go back to index product and we have result is API client.getFromJSON async. And this must be a property, not a class. So I will create a property API client and use inject attribute to inject it. And it will return base response model. And the path of API is API product. Then check if return success. Convert the data property by JSON convert. Not JSON converter, you should install Newtonsoft JSON. JSON convert.deserialize object and pass into it rs.data to string. We missing pass the type here. And it should call await instead of return. Okay, now let's show this models in the UI. If it null, I will show loading. else I will make a table and use Bootstrap to show the properties. And for each this list. And I will make a button to update and delete record. Okay, now let's change the nav link to product. And don't forget to set the page as product in our Razor component. Some think wrong here. In program, you can see the base address is API service. If we use view mode, it won't know what the API service is. It can only automatically map when we run Aspire app host. But now I just want to view it. Just replace it by the address of API service. Great. Now we can see the list of products. So in this part 1, we went over how to set up the base follow service-oriented architecture, SOA, and how to show the data in Blazor Web App. If you would like to see how to do create, update, delete the records, comment below and I will make it if you need. Don't forget to subscribe me and click the bell to not miss any new topics. Thank you and see you soon.